Hello and welcome to the aForm Show, the premier podcast for all things architecture and design across the MENA region. Welcome to your tribe. Today's episode is supported by SkyStruct, the groundbreaking construction and project management solution that's absolutely turning heads in the industry. They are bringing together architects, engineers, project managers, procurement, and essentially any stakeholder onto one singular platform. Yes, clients are included. SkyStruct is genuinely changing the game. Its tailored modules for construction management, inventory, labor, cost management helps streamline the chaos of construction projects. They are rolling out very soon in Dubai, but you as the listener can get in early. Drop us an email at hello@aform.studio and find out how SkyStruct is the future, and it is here today. Now, let's get into the episode. Welcome to the show, everyone. Today we are joined by Ryan Sailsman, Director of Architecture at Jones Architecture and Design, also known as JAD. Ryan has acquired a wealth of knowledge across multiple markets and building typologies. Most importantly, he brings a holistic design approach to the entire project lifecycle. So, without further ado, let's get into it. Welcome to the show, Ryan.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
Mate, we've been trying to put this together for a while, so I thank you so much for your time.
No. Thank you for coming.
So I know that off record, we sort of started to get into your sort of origin story. And I thought it was quite interesting about the ambidextrous crayon metaphor. So if you can start our listeners off with that,
Sure.
how did you sort of find architecture?
My first love was art. And the reason being is because it is the least stressful, kind of academic kind of pathway that you can choose. So for me, those kind of 2 hours in high school drawing comics and superheroes and dragons, which, if I remember correctly, actually was my art GCSE submission, were the best times where I didn't have to worry about final payments and getting kind of presentations out and stuff like that. So yeah, first love being art. Ambidextrous, God knows why. I believe I just needed to color something in faster. My only worry.
I got 2 hands, I can use them both.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Save some time.
Exactly that, yeah.
So that was art. Then how the transition from art to architecture?
Okay, so this is interesting because I ended up going to a high school. That high school actually got shut down. It was very, very rough. During that time, like if I divulge, my parents ended up kind of like separating. So I moved to an absolutely complete brand new area, complete brand new high school and everything like that. And art was really at that time the only thing that I excelled in. I ended up going to do my A-levels at a different school, I think a much better school, because I've always had some kind of academic pull. That then kind of allowed me to I failed then my A-levels. So I failed my A-levels on the premise that I'd come from a really bad school. Right. I thought I'm just as smart as you guys. Yes, I don't have to work. And yeah, I failed miserably. Ended up kind of having then to go to college to study art. To get my kind of points up, my UCAS points, to get into the unis that actually did architecture, the ones that I wanted to go to. Now, for the 2 years of A-levels that I did, I actually studied physics, engineering, math, graphics, and also media. And I found pretty much all of them fairly kind of easy, except for physics. Physics really kind of dragged me down a little bit, I think, because I didn't necessarily have like a solid foundational background in maths at that time. And
these are all at sort of the GCSE levels.
This is A level. This is A level, to the point where I think I was doing double school days for 2 years. So I was doing 6 hours of maths a day after my actual A-levels, my school day, just to catch up almost. So I was resitting my maths and physics GCSEs whilst taking maths and physics in A-level.
Wow.
And then, as I said, so it was a duplicate day. So I was doing 6 hours plus then the 6 hours for 2 years. Ended up coming out of that very stressful time, and I went to Kingston College to study art. And at that time, because I was clearing so much paperwork for the last 2 years, I'll never forget it. It will always stay with me. The first lesson of that art program was the teacher screwed up a ball threw it into the middle of the table and went, draw it.
Yeah.
And at that point, I think I just had, sunbeam kind of shining down on me. Yeah, you've reached the pearly gates. Somehow, some way you've got it. But for me, again, that came after I had a brutal awakening of going to sixth form. Going to the uni and interviews after having taken those A levels, getting into a couple unis, not the ones that I wanted to go to necessarily. They still did architecture, they're still London based, but not the ones that I wanted. And they basically told me, where's your art portfolio? And this is another thing that I would love to kind of just get across in terms of information. If you want to study architecture, you have to probably get that information from an actual architect and maybe not your teacher.
100%.
Yeah, I got advised to do physics and all of these things. And really and truly, I didn't study art, which I was really good at, as I mentioned before. And when I actually went to the university interviews, I didn't even have a portfolio. I had a small graphics portfolio, but everyone was carrying these books of art. So it was a massive awakening for me, but it also gave me what I like to call the fire, the internal fire. That feeling of failure allowed me to excel and propelled me to work. So I always used to say to myself, like, I might not be the smartest in the room, but, knock me down 10 times, I will get up 11.
Right.
And that has paid dividends.
Right.
Moving forwards. Yeah.
Right. I did not know this. And it is shocking to me because that is quite literally what happened with me.
Oh, amazing.
Word to word.
There we go.
I mean, it is shockingly accurate.
Yeah.
I went down to St. Mary's over here and I did my GCSEs from there. Fairly average student, P's and C's. Art was the only thing which, again, I didn't even have to try. And it was always like, oh, here's another A. Or let me try. Oh, an A star. Look at that. And everything else was like C, D.
Yeah, actually pretty much the same.
And then come time for A levels, I just didn't have an option even because the schools that we went to, they were kind of typically offering, the sort of, on the sciences, there was the, physics, chem and maths and so on. And then on the business side of things, there was accounts and economics and, all of that. Art as an A-level subject wasn't even an option. Neither was media or graphics or anything like that. And lo and behold, come A levels, that's when I failed. Because I was like, I don't understand what is this derivation integration nonsense.
Yeah.
Do I really need this in my life? Yeah, failed miserably and pretty much had to do what you did. Sort of the duplicate, double days situation. I was giving my AS levels because that's what I had to do because I basically passed a couple of papers, failed a few papers. So redoing some of them with Edexcel whilst studying for the other ones to give them in the next month. Yeah, it is ridiculous. So as I'm hearing that, I'm like, there is someone else who knows exactly what I went through.
When you look back, like retrospectively, it's super bad time of life. A lot of work being done, especially the age as well.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like for me, that was the hardest because for me, it became more that at that juncture in life is where you see a lot of your friends go off to uni, especially for someone like myself being in Dubai. No one really at that time hung out in Dubai. Right?
Yeah.
Everyone was like, all right, I'm off to Canada, off to the UK, off to Australia. And you see all these friends leave and you kind of just get left behind almost to an extent.
Yeah.
And not due to anyone's, detriment. It's just life moves on without you, I would suspect, to an extent.
Yeah. And no, you're completely right. So for me at that time, my dad had obviously left for Dubai. My friends did leave for university. So at that time when I was supposed to graduate and go to university and people spread far and wide over the country and so on, I was left at home. So for a whole year, but again, almost made you into the person you are today.
Yeah.
Because at that time, I had to go to a brand new college where I didn't know anyone.
Right.
And in not knowing anyone, I had to make new friends. And I picked my college just far enough out that it was almost like a uni experience.
Yes.
Brand new place, So the travel was a lot, but it did really kind of massage and gear me up to kind of getting into uni. So after I had finished that art foundation degree, that art foundation degree had a 6-month and a 6-month kind of choice, whether you would want to study fashion or architecture. And initially I chose fashion.
Interesting. Why? I mean, okay, sorry. Yeah. Continue, but I do have a question about this.
Yeah,
why,
sure.
Why those two? Why not architecture and media, or why not media and interior design? Why those two?
The uni and the school, like, it was synonymous. It was very kind of, synonymous with fashion as a degree. Yeah. So they actually had a separate fashion building that was kind of next to the art building. So you could choose to go and do that. And then also, I think Kingston College had Kingston University, which was also obviously same area, but they specialized in architecture.
Right.
So it was, I think, a real kind of easy transition for you to do one or the other. I did the fashion bit for a while, and then I actually flicked it over to architecture. And the funny thing is, I enjoyed it so much that I worked 2 weeks in advance. And again, just because, the paperwork clearance from the physics and stuff like that previous, I was just so used to handling paperwork and getting through masses and masses of exercises that, to me, an architecture kind of project, which wouldn't be as serious as that at uni sort of thing. And, you get to make models and all of this. I loved it. So I just excelled. I think I passed that course with 2 marks off of a perfect submission.
Wow.
So I just went completely overboard, and it was fun. And that I think, one coupled with the A-levels that I did have managed to get, when I went to my interviews, I think I got into, at that time then, 4 out of the 5 unis that I had actually applied for in London, because my UCAS points were through the roof at that point.
Right.
Yeah, so it was good. It worked out in the end.
Yeah. And it's an interesting thing that you touched upon, which this is almost kind of taking a very hard left turn and becoming more about inspiration and motivation and, fuel that fire.
Yeah.
But it is so important. It is ridiculous. Very often I think about that period of my life, and I think that had I not gone through that, I probably, with a certain amount of certainty, can say I would not be doing even 10% of probably what I do now.
Yeah.
I think I would just get so used to coasting.
Yeah.
That, like, comfort is where all dreams go to die.
Yeah.
I think that's what would have happened to me.
I think, and again, because my parents left the UK fairly kind of early, right? And I obviously was at uni, and I at that time don't really have any kind of like immediate siblings.
Right.
So I spent a lot of time alone, kind of in deep thought, thinking about these sorts of things. And for me, where did I get the ambition, I think is the word, to want to be able to come here. A lot of it has to do with exposure, but a lot of it does have to come with just being in really uncomfortable situations. So as you said, all of my friends had left at that point. I didn't necessarily have immediate family close to me at that point. So I was very much alone. And then it becomes a fight or flight. So I would be coming to Dubai to visit my parents, like Dad specifically, and I would see the life that he had then in comparison to where I was living in certain parts of London, that kind of student life, but B, even before that, college life was not great in the areas that I was kind of living in as well. And because I had got that kind of free spirit of, okay, I'm able to travel, I can make friends, so on and so on, I was going any and everywhere. So I think before I ended up kind of leaving London and finishing my master's off and stuff like that, I'd lived in over, I think, maybe 12 different places in London, north, south, east, and west.
Wow.
And I just circulated. So every single year I studied in architecture, I moved to a completely different new place.
Wow.
So there are places I've lived in, I would always say the kind of roughest of the rough. But then I remember one year.
This is the posh year.
Yeah, well, no. There was a couple push years, but one. So obviously Westminster, which is where I studied, that campus is on where is it? Baker Street, which is opposite Madame Tussauds, which is very central London, super central actually. I lived in, I think, opposite Selfridges, so on Oxford Street for 1 year, very luckily. I then lived in Fitzrovia, and these things to me were completely out of my remit. I hadn't even heard of majority of these places. But then, on the other hand, I lived in Peckham, I lived, Camdens and these kind of places. And it's not to kind of knock those places because culturally they are untouchable, as part of like the materiality of London and its growth sort of thing. But yeah, complete chalk and cheese. And I think what that allowed me to do is really objectify. And because I was very much like in my own head as a thinker and somebody who didn't have somebody else to be able to be like, this is my thoughts and feelings, especially because none of my friends went to study architecture. At the time, I remember one of my tutors saying that in terms of like black people in architecture at the time, it was 2%, I think, in the 80s. And it went down.
Really?
It actually went down. I think it's increased. I see a lot more these days. Yeah. But it was something that, especially growing up in kind of East London, I never really thought about until I got into architecture, got into one of the lectures. And I remember, you should never really compare. But I remember somebody sat at the front talking about women in architecture. And I remember looking around the entire hall and a good 80% or a good 60 to 80% of the people that were there were female. But then I looked around and out of 260 students, I believe 6, including myself, were black.
Wow.
And 2 out of the 6 were women. And to me, it never was a noticeable thing until that point.
Until it kind of gets pointed out to you.
Yeah. So, not a comparison, but I do think that I've just had a kind of real up and down, real end-to-end objective view of A, the industry, but also B, cultural situations in London. Because again, for myself, and we spoke about it kind of off camera, I felt that I've never really kind of fit the typical kind of framework for an architect, and you almost get like imposter syndrome.
Right. So if I had to sort of, well, not summarize you, obviously, there is so much more to Ryan, I'm sure. But I suppose initially before we start the podcast, I always wonder, if you don't have a reason to be in Dubai, for example, like myself, born and raised, I suppose I should be here. I always wonder what motivates expats to come to Dubai, especially, at the time when probably you started coming. Dubai really wasn't the most happening place.
No,
right?
It wasn't like it is now, yeah.
So I initially was wondering, what would have motivated Ryan to come here? But now that I kind of have these blanks sort of filled in, just giving your sort of temperament and, seeking out discomfort almost to an extent, it all kind of now makes sense. So I almost want to give you a bit of a ramp and be like, is this why you kind of ended up here, or was there something else?
Well, I think, again, it's exposure because at the time, my dad got one of those cowboy contracts.
Right.
You're laughing. The cowboy contracts in the early Dubai days. And at that time, as I was saying, I was, the Oxford Street days were over.
Yes.
I wasn't living in kind of the best places. And on top of that as well, uni was coming to an end. So my only choice then was almost to move back home. So my first job outside of graduating my master's was in Peckham. And I love, the person that actually gave me my first start and everything like that. He's a great guy. And what happened was I was living then in my friend's basement, small kind of rent, kind of payment. And, unfortunately, the house was in a little bit of disrepair.
Right.
And all architecture students face this conundrum that I'm about to say right now, right? Where is my money after the 7 years? So it all kind of just dawned on me, and I thought to myself, wow, everyone always tells you to go to uni and study and do all these things and so on and so on. But yet here I am in my friend's basement, cold, just to, get to work. And when I'm coming home, I also, I'm real down and it's depressing. And another thing as well with the whole kind of, why have you left? What motivated you to leave is a lot of people always kind of, snigger at this or whatever, but weather it's huge. When British people in Dubai experience rain, the disdain on the faces, comparatively to other people who are like, oh my God, it's raining. This is so great. We have PTSD to the highest level.
Really?
Yeah, I've got to the highest of highest levels because, we always call it a British summer, 2 days of sunshine.
Right. And that's it.
Yeah, 2 days of sunshine, that's it. My PTSD comes back to waking up in the morning, it being pitch black, having to then put on a massive coat. It's raining, walk through the rain in the dark to the bus, from the bus to the train, somebody's armpit in my face whilst I'm on the commute to work, get off, pelted with rain again, do my architectural day. So like I'm already kind of just not in the right frame of mind. And then have my architectural day to then be pelted with rain again and then be on the train with the same person's armpit to then kind of get home and just start that process all again. And for a good 11 months of the year, all you are doing is just kind of tilting your head back and just thinking, oh my God, when is the next holiday? When can I get to Dubai? When can I get to Jamaica or wherever it is that I'm trying to go? And my logical thinking of breakdown process was, why wouldn't you want to live that every day?
Right.
Hence.
Makes sense. And I think at the time when you probably came to Dubai as an architect, that must have been a banging time to like start, right?
It was, because I got way too much money for absolutely no work whatsoever. Yeah. So, thank you to, it was, who you are, but thank you. It's still practicing out here as well. Great guy. Gave me my first kind of role. And at that time, it was, I didn't know anything.
Right.
How dare I collect that paycheck?
Yes.
How dare I? But that being said, it wasn't necessarily a baptism of fire. I was always kind of skilled at Rhino. I'll take you back to kind of a uni day where I was stippling for 3 days straight. Stippling.
It is quite meditative once you get into it.
Yeah, of course. But when you kick that down to a 0.1, it gets a bit. So I remember stippling for 3 days straight and, did the crit. And I remember my tutor going, well, that's wrong. And ripping the paper off the wall. And
oh, no.
It absolutely devastated me. And I just said, never, ever again. So, point of that was that I had my Rhino skills. So I was always okay to dance in concept.
Yes.
So concept, I can do anything I want on a computer in Rhino.
Right.
You put whatever in front of me, I can do it. But that doesn't translate to what I call real architecture.
Right.
Not necessarily saying that like the concept point of it is, rubbish or anything like that, but there's just so much more to it that coming out of university, you're not necessarily exposed to. And you always feel like because you can't use maybe that program, the people that do that technical stuff, they are the ones that kind of love that technical side of it. And it's you versus them, and they stay over there and you're over this side, the happy side of the office. And, but then you actually realize that it's obviously a whole kind of process to get towards the end. And from my uni, it wasn't something that they readily taught to any great degree, which I completely agree with, having come through the full journey now.
Yeah.
Teaching people to be artists rather than, people who can just be technicians almost, I think is a greater feat and serves you better in the long run than the kind of other. But, do I enjoy planning? Do I enjoy CAD? Not to look at. Could do with an emoji every now and then.
Yeah, I completely get where you're coming from. And, again, this is something that we spoke of at going to jury crits quite regularly, especially for someone like myself. This comes up as a big insecurity with students in the sense that they get this notion that, oh, my visualization isn't as photorealistic as it could be. And, my, like my InDesign presentation skills aren't as good. And I was like, to be honest, when jury comes and you're being judged for your work, it's actually the content. Yes, to an extent, it's the graphics and the presentation and so on, but the bulk of it is actually your critical thinking and your sort of thought process and your analysis of what the brief was and what your solution was, and that's what you should kind of focus on. So yeah, I completely get that, and I tell them the same thing that it is. I mean, if you genuinely like CAD, right?
Yeah.
Which there are people who do, right? Who absolute wizards at it, right? I mean, if you see them go, they're like just smashing it, right? Yeah. And they're genuinely happy doing it. I'm like, more power to you, go ahead. But I think for the majority of people, that is not, the kind of line you want to go down. But you touch upon an interesting point, which is, I think another sort of attribute I can assign next to your name is you come off as very self-aware.
Maybe, yeah.
And I think a combination of a lot of attributes, self-awareness being one, is something which I can see a market like Dubai really, really valuing. Because I think to some degree, I mean, many people, I mean, this is kind of like a common thing now, right? Maybe everyone says, oh, I'll go to Dubai for a couple of years, get that money, come back, and then do something else. That's always the game plan.
Yeah.
And then before you know it, oh, it's been 5 years. Oh, it's been 7 years.
Yeah.
I met my partner here.
Yeah.
Oh, it's been 10 years. Now my kid goes to school here. Oh, it's been 15 years. Oh, now, wait a minute. I've lived here more than I've lived back home. Is this home now? And you can lose so much time, but just because of the pace that Dubai works at, that if you're not self-aware, you can very easily enter that sort of comfort death zone.
Yeah, 100%. I believe that I've been through I feel like I've been through a very kind of interesting time in Dubai. Being a very early expat, very young, and seeing Dubai develop to a point where I've seen not just the life cycle of building, especially when COVID came around and stuff like this, but also the financial life cycle, but then also the life cycle of peers. So, a lot of things, a lot of kind of, maybe not to go into on this podcast so much, but a lot of my friends, as you mentioned before, they end up leaving because they get confused at that juncture. I'm very secure here because I've had family here and I'm very lucky for that. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and kid myself and tell you that I had a better day-to-day life in the UK, because I didn't.
Correct.
And that's just how it is, right? I think having experienced what I would call like highs of maybe living in central London and, even comparatively to where I live now, it's a little bit, again, is a bittersweet. It's chalk and cheese, I'd say, again. And that's coming from the London side at that central point, not really matching up to my day-to-day life and how happy I am here in comparison. And everyone back home you would assume that's where you want to get to. Oh, you either want to move to central London, have an amazing apartment in central London, or you'd want to move the countryside, have a great big house in the countryside. And for me, and definitely like my dad always says, I love the UK for what it gave me in terms of, it definitely hardened me. It definitely gave me a kind of bob and weave, duck and dive mentality. It gave me scope and it gave me a vast people experience. And that has served me tremendously. You almost say, I said to you about kind of imposter syndrome. When you get into these environments, especially architecture, you do get the imposter syndrome, but you almost feel like a chameleon in certain aspects, because culturally, there are parts of my kind of heritage culture but more so the social culture that I grew up in London, translating into this environment, they do not mix. In which case, at work, I am one person. Right. And with my friends who I have known since I was X or whatever, I am another person. And that's not to say that, I feel like I'm chopping and changing personalities or anything like that. But those two worlds just do not coexist.
Yeah, but I mean, the duality can exist.
What do you? Okay, elaborate.
Yeah, I mean, it's. I hear you, because I sort of deal with that imposter syndrome to some extent, not as severely, but to some extent. And yeah, for a very long time, I used to be exactly that. I used to be this sort of, one way at work and then a completely different way, once I'm out the door. But I think I'm now starting to feel that there is, I don't know how to phrase it. I suppose I don't really see it as a definitive break anymore. I think they're kind of bleeding into each other at the moment. And I think that could be because as you progress in your career, you have an amount of credible project experience behind you, wherein that sort of elevates confidence. And then, I don't know, there is definitely a bleed that's happening between both.
I think that it's a responsibility shift. So as I've progressed in career, the responsibility that I have on my shoulders now, comparison to maybe 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years ago, is again chalk and cheese. So I know that I have to go out into the market and generate projects. And those projects need to come back here, and I need to be the one to
deliver it.
Yes. A, deliver it, but B, also help my team make sure that, everyone knows what they're doing, and I have to be the example. Whereas before I didn't. So because that responsibility shift was much more in favor of the break, the clean break, it was easier to do. Whereas now, because you're so much more involved in other people. So, I could compare and say, maybe I didn't necessarily have as much kind of empathy but that might be an age thing for maybe others in the office and stuff like that. Now I'm completely invested.
Right.
Now I know that I've got to go out because so-and-so's got a holiday coming up and they need a little bit of this, and so-and-so's got
kid on the way.
Young Faisal's graduation, and Faisal needs some new shoes. So I've got to go out and do that, and I'm invested in that, and I enjoy that. And as you said, kind of critically thinking around myself, my position, the awareness that I believe I'm kind of now operating with has allowed me to navigate this market, but then also sustain myself in Dubai.
So then let me ask you, because this is something which I think would be quite interesting for people who are not in not Dubai, but I would say even UAE, GCC even to an extent. But since you're out there, drumming up business almost on the daily, I would imagine.
Yeah.
What's your read on the market at the moment?
Dubai has significantly changed after COVID. Significantly. Before COVID and the construction crash, Dubai was frivolous. So people were throwing money. It was, rivers of gold, and it was those days, right? Now, my opinion of the market is that even people with kind of mass wealth behind them, they are more kind of fishing for deals and bargains, and they're a lot more careful with their money. Whereas before, it was literally, and you know this as well, every other car on the road was a Ferrari and a Lamborghini and so on and so on. Dubai is a transient city that is trying to develop into a sustained city. And whilst it is doing that, there will be ups and downs and peaks and troughs. And it's whether or not you have the gumption to ride out the low points the people that I admire and the people that I looked up to when I was a lot younger, and I still look up to them, but when I was younger in Dubai, and they used to tell me about, how it was in the 2008 recession and what they did, and they didn't they didn't have salary for like 2-3 months. And after that recession, then Dubai recovered, companies exploded, and absolutely, the building came back, and it was kind of, you're getting the benefit of a developing country. And I believe that, the market to me now, but it might be from a personal level, is a lot more stable than it was.
Okay. Let me then ask the question. Do you think it's clients, developers, private owners, whatever it is? Do you think it's them being, I know you mentioned kind of, looking for a bargain and so on, but do you think it's the market becoming more frugal, or do you think it's the market just maturing over time?
Maturing. 100% maturing.
Okay.
It's becoming a sustained city.
Right.
So as we grow in population, and, as we're kind of, again, to mention, maturing in the decisions that are being made, the possibilities and the opportunities that are kind of being thrown our way, I think that Dubai has now learned from prior mistakes,
right,
maybe. And it's definitely, I always called it a kind of social growth. So Dubai went, and and as I said to you, having seen it from sand when Marina was 4 towers,
right,
to now to this point, I always knew that the next step in Dubai's growth, which I believe we are now right slap bang in the middle of, was its social growth. And that was, the theaters came, the culture came, the art came, this kind of thing. All of these things to help supplement the buildings and make it not a very plastic or iron and cold city. These things are now kind of really developing here. So, could you 15 years ago, be on the side of the street and talk to somebody confidently about the architecture of a museum of the future and have, everyone's got an opinion of it now, right?
Right. Right.
That just was not the case about 10, 15 years ago.
100%. And I think you touched upon an interesting point, which is, I think if you look, 10 years back is a good time frame. A lot of generic mediocrity with architecture, right? Whereas if you kind of look at, again, maybe the resi sector is not the right one. I mean, not the right typology to look at. But if you look at the public realm, right? If you look at even malls, for example, right? I would say maybe 10 years back, 7 out of 10 were, blah or whatever. Maybe one was architecturally interesting. I think now that number's up to maybe 3 or 4 of those projects are architecturally interesting. And of course, if you kind of, move more north in the country and you look at Sharjah, for example, I mean, some of my most favorite buildings are in Sharjah.
Yeah.
Which again seems very counterintuitive. One would think that, Dubai would also have that, but I think they're definitely on the path to get there.
Dubai now, as you say, has learned a lot from kind of its past, but it had to be the first one to push, the UAE into prominence and expose to the rest of the world. And I think that it's been a perfect trifecta of different kind of amalgamations that have come together to be able to facilitate that. And what I kind of mean by that is there's always that kind of analogy of build it and they will come. To displace that level of population and centralize that level of mass building is such an undertaking. However, naysayers 90%, but we got to do it.
Yeah.
We got to do it because out of the 50 that we are proposing, 2 of them will work, and those 2 will push us into the next kind of development phase, which is what this country did.
100%. I completely agree. I just want to touch upon again a point which we sort of briefly skimmed over, because I do have a sort of counter argument to that, which is we were talking about how the market sort of reached stability, I would say. I think it was a couple of funnily enough, our episode with Lee.
Yeah.
Shout out to Lee if you're listening.
Hi, Lee.
We spoke about, and this must have been maybe a year ago, right? We spoke about how, I mean, the both of us, Lee doing the work that he does and the work that sort of I'm involved in, the work that you're probably also involved in, the sort of high-end luxury residential sector, right?
Mm.
I mean, it would be very difficult to convince someone on the outside that, yeah, that's a very stable market here. Considering everything that you see, considering, I think the last stat I heard was that there's a 80 key apartment building that's launched, I think, every 2 days or something now, which is nuts.
Yeah.
So with that going on, do you still think there's that stability?
When I say stability, I'm actually talking about it from a population growth point of view. And when I think of a country's stability, I think of growth of that kind of developing middle class. And, if my staff kind of hear me, so my colleagues hear me say that kind of stuff, they'll probably be rolling their eyes because it's something I say every day. In this office, majority of the clients that we have, we facilitate that growing middle class. And what I mean by that is the people that have now stabilized in this country have a little bit more money to spend. It doesn't necessarily mean that, they're spending 50 million on developing this villa. Even though I still have my connections with those people, I still have work from those people. But we're talking about the 1%. Even in Dubai, there's the 1%. They're always going to be okay.
Right. True.
But the middle class who are still susceptible at that point have grown, I believe, now to a point where your expats are 10 to 20 to 30 years deep. And it's now just not that guy who's also been here for like 35 years. It's not one and one. It's a good number of people. And you know that if they've managed to kind of stay here for that long, they would have amassed.
Yeah.
And they become then the pillars of communities and the people who are able to, when the market does crash, have the money to buy elsewhere to stabilize them that much. Whereas before, when it crashed,
there was nobody.
There was no one.
Yeah. Makes sense. I guess I never really thought about it in that sense. I think we get so sort of, drawn towards that 1%, I suppose, that you kind of forget there's 99% behind them.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. All right. Okay. So I think we've obviously touched upon, a lot of topics. And as we sort of wind down the episode, this is typically when, I'm sure our listeners are now rolling their eyes because they know exactly what's coming. But I typically like to look forward at this point, right? I mean, the show is all about, you as a designer, what sort of makes you tick, what, is of interest to you, things like that. So needless to say, you've obviously, you've been involved in a lot of work, clearly highly ambitious, highly motivated. I think you're at a point, probably, I'm just assuming here, I think you're at a point now where what's next for Ryan becomes a very important question, because I think it sort of will define the next decade, if not more, of where you go down. I kind of like to call it the domino effect, where the small domino like tips the a slightly bigger one and a slightly bigger one, till eventually you have like that big domino that has the biggest effect.
Yeah,
I feel like you're kind of at that big domino at the moment.
My boss is going to listen to this episode.
So I'm always interested to ask someone at your juncture, what are you thinking about? What even interests you at this point? What are you kind of working towards? Is there a vision of some kind? Is there a goal that you're working towards?
Well, I think the gradual progression for me now, because I do realize that, especially title-wise, I have got into a position very, very young, and I do objectify and I do look at that. And I ask myself, okay, what is the next step? What should I be aiming for? Now, I told you that there is, yes, certain elements of imposter syndrome, but also I'm very real in terms of architecture, much like, the footballer analogy. It's not my life. It's not my life. I love design, but I love design in all facets.
Right.
Hence why the office looks like this. The reason I love the integration of fit out and interior design much more, and a lot of my colleagues are kind of scratching their head as to why I'm doing kind of more of this than I was architecture. I do both. But that's because I like my mind to be occupied by other things that I can think about. One of the worst things that I think that you can do as a creative is, again, as you said, now you're in comfort and to just churn, the same thing out. I like to indulge in, probably as you can tell, speech, narrative. I want to have conversations about a spoon. Yeah, that's what I'm interested in. All of the architects that I believe got to a certain point in terms of, I no longer look at you as just somebody that has delivered a great building. You have generated this monster of a following based upon your perception of the world in a design sense. So we spoke again off camera, off the pod, and you were talking to me about students, and I said to you, everyone wants to kind of go out and work for your Norman Fosters and your Zaha Hadid. And that was exactly what I wanted to do until I started kind of, objectifying how they got there and why they got there. Their philosophies are not centered around specifically architecture. They might be centered around social, so people. That then leads, what do people engage with? It's not just homes. You wear clothes. Yeah. What do you eat off of? You came here dressed in all black, and that's a representation of you for today. It might just be today only. For the rest
I go all white. Once
all white and pink on Saturdays.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So, and I'm interested in that. I don't want to just be somebody that, in terms of my own interest, only kind of heads down one path. Yes, I do want to progress in my career. I do want to, at some point, I think that there is an offer actually on the moment for a percentage of JAD. Where that takes me in kind of the next couple of years, I'm not too sure. I'm very interested in flipping properties because of the two licenses. What it's completely exposed me to is A, architectural contracts, B, fit out contracts. I love being able to go into a place and completely take it apart mentally and tell you how much it costs, what tiles should be where, PC rates. I obviously then have MEP background from my dad, so I can dabble a little bit in that as well. But being able to go into a completely blank apartment and tell you this is how much you need, this is how much potentially you're able to pull out. But then also having the experience to go to that real super high end and go in there and say, okay, you require this, and this in terms of finish, necessarily telling that person how much it's going to cost majority of the time, what's a couple $100,000 here or there, but a couple $100,000 to that developing middle class person is the world.
Right.
And I still want to keep that. Do I want to be in architecture for the rest of I love football, by the way, so I use a footballer analogy, right? There's a footballer called Ben White. He plays for Arsenal at the moment. And people kind of get on his back because he came out and said, when I'm playing football, there's nothing else on my mind. I will be the best on the pitch. But when I come away from football, I don't want to talk about it.
Right.
And I'm very much like that. So when I'm here practicing architecture, it's like, love it to pieces. But what I actually really like doing as a person is, I love kind of turning my brain off, as most people do. They come from work, and then just losing myself in something. Anything where I don't necessarily have to think, but it's still engaging me. I got taught by a guy called Sean Griffiths, who was the ex-director of Fat Architects at the time. And the partner of the studio was called Kester Rattenbury. And they taught me at Westminster. And Sean ended up transitioning into an artist. And Kester was, I think, at the time writing a PhD thesis. And, what they taught me was there are no rules. Be an artist first. Allow your mind to be completely free and then bring it back into, with that crazy idea, control that crazy idea. And I fell out with them, I think, after the first year because I didn't get what they were trying to do. How dare you tell me not to draw a plan in CAD and use a crayon? Who do you think, is crazy? But, on the other side of it, it's been one of the best educational gifts that I have ever received, because it's just allowed me to, if I want to go and repeat something that I've seen before, that whole kind of contemporary and this is what we should do, that's no problem, because I understand that. I understand that you can look at relationships and repeat and stuff like this. But Anthony Gaudis, your Zaha Hadids.
Those are one-offs, right?
I don't think that they are, because, there are so many of those architects that you can name, and it never really became, it's not necessarily like, it's a philosophy first. And I believe that if you're able to kind of stand behind your philosophy and act out what it is that's in your mind, like, I know, for instance, that if I was to keep going down the path and finding clients that allowed me to kind of do what I wanted to do, that not all of them are going to work, but there might be one in there. And that one might have significance to the right people.
Right.
So if you're public and you maybe, I always used to laugh at people who kind of took pictures of them looking at paintings with, kind of staring at it. And it was like, do you really know what you're looking for in this? You know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah.
And, that one thing that you could design, you could see, that's the magic of architecture, right? Somebody could be using that and it just is so perfect and so different. And the search of the new vernacular, which is the antithesis of architecture, that it becomes magical. And all my peers know exactly what it is that's happening. And then there is a level of, okay, that he understands.
Right.
And that's what I would love to produce, something like that, because then I would just retire and then,
That's it. Thank you very much, mic drop.
literally.
Wow. All right. Okay. Interesting. I feel like we could chat forever.
Yeah. Hopefully you come back, we do it again.
100%. We do have a bit of a closing tradition on the show. And again, for our listeners, please stop the eye roll. I can see you. Although you think I can't, but I can. We typically have a question that's been asked by a previous guest.
Sure.
Not knowing who the next guest is.
That's cool.
So it's completely blind.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're a bit silly.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah.
And sometimes they can get quite weird. But I think the one that you have today is fairly okay. I mean, actually very in keeping with the times. So we're actually just rolling off, whenever this episode comes out live, we're actually rolling off Index that just concluded.
I just went yesterday, actually.
Yeah, in World Trade Center. Having attended all 3 days, I can safely say that AI is here to stay.
Yeah.
And I think that reflects in the question, because the question is to you, AI with designers. Yes, we agree that it is useful. However, as a business model, as a design business model, I think is what they meant to say, as a design business model, do you see AI being integrated in more than just creating pretty images?
I am so glad that you asked me this question, because I just spoke at Convex.
Okay.
And that was exactly the question that they asked me.
Really?
No. But
I can ask you another one.
No. Kind of. It was in and around that point, but it got me actually thinking, right? Because, well, I'll answer the question and then I'll give you kind of let you make of it what you will. But I also, after that talk, rang my dad for his opinion on what I was thinking about. Now, AI is a tremendous tool. AI, we are only at the beginning. We're only at the beginning. Much like there's a real nice piece, and I remember it being rolled out at university about when plastic was first introduced to the world. And it was described in a newspaper excerpt, and they basically were saying this weird machine and the descriptive nature of it, we don't know what this thing is, and all of a sudden this green ooze came out of it and it stank to high heaven. It smelled like petroleum and everyone was like, oh my God, what is that? And you fast forward a couple years and now, as much as we're trying to retract it, but everything is plastic. We bend plastic to our absolute will. There's nothing we can't do with plastic. Okay. And it's exactly the same for AI. So how AI will evolve and I believe the question that I would love to have answered by ChatGPT, but I might type it in after this podcast because I think that it would just chuck me back ones and zeros and crash. What is the culture of AI? Until AI can develop a culture that allows itself to lend to art, to music, to architecture, and the things that are the building blocks of human civilization, AI will only be a tool, a facilitative tool for architects to use commercially to get quick ideas out. That's it. Yeah. If we, when I look at some of the mid-journey stuff and it's so super complicated and there's no real thought in the kind of backdrop of that, I'm almost rolling my eyes because there is so much, as we mentioned before, as a conceptual designer that comes at the back end of that to make it a realization. So if you're showing me the pretty image and you don't know how much it costs, what the logistics are, how to facilitate it, how does it stand up, what are the, what does it feel like? I don't want to know. That means absolutely nothing to me. But once AI does develop its own culture, and that's the kind of, what's the Terminator, the Skynet 2.0? Yeah.
Skynet going live.
Yeah. That when the Skynet starts asking itself that kind of questions and it's able to say, okay, like that's when I believe, AI will evolve to a point where it can then begin to almost take over what it is that we do on an artist basis, an artist level. When I spoke at Confex, the guy before me, he was talking about, this image can imitate streets like Barcelona and stuff like this. And my first kind of comment on the back of that was that Barcelona and, the Mona Lisa, it's not just a physical thing. That city is so tactile. It is steeped in hundreds and hundreds of years of history and beauty and music and religion and culture that it just adds so much value to that place. And to just repeat that in an image which doesn't have all of that, when I speak about Barcelona, I smell croquetas.
Yeah. I mean, I was actually thinking about specifically the street right outside Camp Nou.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah. I completely get that. Just to sort of, I suppose, add on to the answer to the question. A key takeaway that I had from Index yesterday, which was, I can't remember the gentleman's name, but the way that he put it is, he's like, with just thinking about, the whole mid-journey and, runway sort of angle is specific to the sort of ideation, generation, mood image part of the project lifecycle, right? But he's like, if you think about AI being integrated into multiple parts of the project lifecycle, that's when things get interesting. Because he said, think of it as, now everyone works in BIM, right? Everyone's got like a pseudo digital twin of what they're designing and so on. Can you now get an AI plugin which can basically do hundreds of spot details, based on your model? Because your model's accurate, right? There's some level of accuracy. So that speeds up your production. Once you get a good enough model, can AI then intuitively do a lot of your BOQs and automatically now start understanding financials of a project and then start, adjusting as needed, and almost like a virtual project manager, have it running in the background,
So I'll go one further and I'll bring the podcast now full circle. This is necessary for us to get to the next level of what it is that you're talking about. Now, I don't want to have AI, and this is kind of free game, so you developers out there, please, speed up the process in what I'm about to say. Because I would love a social AI. So if socially, I could say, Alan grew up here. This was his path that he took in school. This is what the grades he got. This is how many kids he's got. This is what his financial status is. This is what he's just bought as a house. Tell me the best colors for Alan. Tell me the best way to kind of configure Alan's house for his kids and so on and so on. Tell me what would be the best outcome for Alan.
Yeah. And to be honest, the thing is, I think, again, even if AI was there 10 years back, probably a much more difficult task. But with the amount of on average, every individual has a pretty detailed digital footprint now. So, yeah, I mean, I can see that only improving. So, unfortunately or unfortunately, that's a good thing.
I'm just thinking about some people's houses just being absolutely wild.
Exactly.
My house is built of chains.
Oh man, yeah, House of Chains. I think that's a good period to the podcast. House of Chains.
Yeah. In development right now. You heard it here first.
All right. Well, I mean, Ryan, thank you so much for your time. I think this has been one of the more rawer podcasts that we've had. And of course, I'm, all about sharing this kind of information, because this is the stuff which, with all due respect, does not get publicized in a magazine or, spoken about very openly. So I thank you for your honesty, number one. And number two, for your time, because, the show is not possible without someone like yourself giving us your time. So I can see a lot more of these happening. For sure.
Yeah,
so we look forward to welcoming you back on in the future.
Thank you so much. I really, really do appreciate you coming down. And as I said, I will only ever, unless you specifically tell me, Ryan, filter it, I will always kind of speak my mind and what's in front of me. So thank you once again. It's a pleasure.
Awesome. And for the rest of you guys, we will catch you guys next week.
Fellow aFormer, thank you so much for your time. If this episode added any value to you, please share it with anyone who may benefit. If you want to carry on the discussion, please get in touch with us over socials. We are at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. That is at aForm Show on the gram and hello@aform.studio on email. Until next time, stay inspired.